welcome to Turn the Page, the official podcast of the Syosset Public Library.
Welcome to Syosset Library's Turn the Page podcast. This is Jessikah. I am going to be hosting today, and I'm here with an author of a really juicy book that will definitely have a lot of people talking, and we're here to talk about it. But first, I'm going to ask her to introduce herself and tell us about this particular book.
Yes, I'm Megan Abbott. So happy to be here and talking to you today. And my latest novel is Beware the Woman, which is about a woman newly married, newly pregnant. Her name is Jessikah, who goes with her husband Jed to the remote Upper Peninsula of Michigan for a little vacation and to spend some time with her father-in-law, Dr. Ash. And while she's up there, she has a little bit of a health scare, and all attention turns to her pregnancy, and it sort of becomes the impetus for her to find out a lot more about her husband and his family and what she's gotten herself into.
Yeah, and I have to say, this book, it's good because it works on a lot of different levels. It is, you could read it and you're like, okay, I'm reading a thriller, but it's also covertly horror in almost like a gothic sense, which I really loved. I'm reading it and I'm getting like a little bit of Rebecca in there. I don't know if that was intentional.
Yeah, no, definitely. Yeah, good, definitely.
Yeah, and just like a whole bunch of other things. And the meaning of the title, I don't want to talk too much about because it might give too many spoilers, but man, this book is I'm a big fan of pregnancy horror. And I think like one thing that Jessikah experiences is aside from the fact that she has like a tenuous relationship with her own mother, Jed seems like a dream on the surface. He's a little bit more complicated, but the way that women are perceived, and then when the way that they're perceived when they're pregnant is very it's very claustrophobic. So you're nodding. We don't do video, but we're doing audio, but I'm going to tell Megan is nodding. So tell us a little bit about where Jessikah's story came from.
Yeah, it was really inspired by this there was somebody had posted these online where someone asks about sort of an ethical question about the some kind of something happening in their lives, and a woman had posted about is it okay, or am I a bad person if I don't want my husband and father-in-law in the delivery room when I give birth? And she went on to discuss how as soon as she became pregnant, her husband and father-in-law became obsessed with her pregnancy, monitoring what she ate and her physical activity. And they even spoke to her doctor behind her back. And she just felt like something had changed. And this wasn't the person she married. And the people had a lot to say on social media, as you can imagine. And I started to think about the way that we treat pregnant women, the way as when we're pregnant we are treated, and the kind of ownership piece sometimes people think that they have over the judgment, and that it all became this kind of swirl for me. And I just really wanted to explore that, especially what it means in our current moment, and what it means, I guess, for women in particular. Sort of you think you have all this sort of progress, and that and then you can quickly be reminded how about that can be taken all away again.
So like I know I called this pregnancy horror, pregnancy suspense, pregnancy thriller, a little bit of gothic. the title Beware the Woman, again, it's like I so want to talk about it because but again, I feel like there's a lot of spoilers, but there's a lot of things that it could mean. You know,
Yeah.
there's some talk about mountain lions, and then there's Mrs. Brandt, who's the caretaker, who talks a lot about Wendy, Jed's mother, which is kind of where I got those Rebecca parallels from, and it was delightful to read. I think without giving too much away, I can say the other thing I kind of want to call this, and I don't know if there's actually a term for it, but it's like covert misogyny horror.
And I hadn't really intended to do that, but I certainly think that a lot of the anxieties of the last few years sort of came through, and this sort of feeling of a lot of stuff going on in the culture and Me Too, and the last administration's sort of notions of I guess sort of losing control over your autonomy over your own body, and the ways that that can happen, and that the one way to talk about the title without spoiling it, I think, is that there's the epigraph to the book, which comes from Erica Jong, is this line she says of, "Beware the man who wants to protect you, he'll protect you from everything but himself." And that's something that was very much on my mind, that sometimes the man who seems to have all the right feelings and have all the right beliefs and respect you and love you, you can't quite tell how that might change when you're pregnant. And the sort of, there's that line in the book, the JC's mom's line to her, "We all marry strangers." And so I think a lot of that anxiety about, do you really know who you've married, for both Jed and JC, was something that I thought about a lot. So the beware the man, beware the woman was definitely something I thought about a lot. That sense of, do we ever really know the other person?
So Dr. Ash was a very compelling villain type character. And I don't think is that too much of a spoiler?
I never really think in terms of villains, but I get why people
he's
do.
Creepy. He is creepy.
He's very charismatic. Of course, he's very welcoming to JC. He makes her feel very much at home and cared for, but there's so much she doesn't know about the family, and that, I think, is sort of one of the sort of staples of a Gothic novel, right? Where it's family secrets, and sort of unpacking those. But for me, coming from the Midwest, he reminds me of a lot of at least in the first half of the book, a lot of the men I grew up with, very polite, respectful of women, very gallant. But if you get into certain areas, you see this other side of them. He's of a different generation. I thought a lot about how much the world has changed for men of his era, sort of a baby boomer, and some men are so comfortable with change and progress, and some aren't, and some seem to be until it's in their house, and then they aren't. So it was a lot of playing around with that.
Yeah, and I think like another thing about it when you talk about that generation, but it's not just that generation, you have a lot of men especially, but yes, I guess from that generation, because that's around when Roe became,
Right. Yeah.
became
The
a
law.
thing.
Yeah. Right.
Like who were like, there'll never be a post-Roe world, and then oops, guess what?
Yeah.
And it's like a lot, like women knew that this was possible. Like women knew, there's no doubt about that for every man who told a woman, or like, yeah, no, this will never happen, there's no way, we knew. Like, yeah,
Yeah.
you
No,
don't, yeah.
I think that's really, the book was finished before the reversal. But it was so uncanny. My editor was reading the manuscript when it happened, and I think that very much we all were feeling this sense that it could happen, because all evidence pointed to that. I mean, we just felt like we were sliding back into something. And I think that anxiety really unconsciously fueled the book, and sort of built into that. I mean, another book and movie I love is Rosemary's Baby, and I think that that I thought about a lot. In that case, it is a horror novel, and there's no Satan in my book, but there is this sort of sense of dread. And I think that's a feeling that a lot of women understand very deeply, that things can turn very quickly. And
For
a
sure.
lot of the exploration of fear in the book is around that particularly female need to be on guard at all times.
Well, in both Beware the Woman and in Rosemary's Baby, I mean, again, it's very different. We're not dealing with like a literal satanic
Right.
cult here, but there is like a cult of mentality. And, in Rosemary's Baby, she like her agency was gone. And that felt very pertinent to JC's story. It was very parallel. Here she is in this isolated situation. They won't let her leave. The only people she's really able to interact with are people who are connected to her husband and her father-in-law. Not exactly the Castevets, but I mean, it's creepy.
Yeah.
But there is that sense of isolation, and having been pregnant, it is isolating. You can get you can there are people, and there are who get together with other pregnant people, and they're able to kind of have this connection. But then at the same time, and especially depending on what your situation is, depending on what your pregnancy is, it can be very isolating, and it can be very scary because people do talk about you like you're not in the room, and people do talk
Yes.
about you like your body is a thing and the rest of you is secondary. And just kind of listening like to poor JC reacting to this man that she loved being so sort of swept up in this world. I mean, we
Yeah.
all kind of talk about regret, like there's a lot of talk about regressing when you go back to your childhood home.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, that honk. I was I'm podcasting from my house right now, but Jed regresses in ways, and his father kind of doesn't respect him when
No.
he's on his own. He makes signs. He's a, what is it, a tube bender?
Yeah. 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 Neon
Yeah,
signs. Yep.
yeah. Yeah, their relationship was fascinating too, if you want to talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, yeah. I think, I think Jed is someone who would like to be his own person and has these artistic yearnings and really loves to imagine himself living this very progressive life with JC, where they're really equals and they're in the moment. And I think that the pull of his dad is a very powerful personality, and I think it makes him feel small in that way that some parent-child relationships remain forever. And I think he can't seem to fight it off. And then he does indeed regress. I mean, we all have that little bit of that. We all know that a little bit, how we can be with our family is really, I always become a teenager again around mine, and that's a natural impulse. But with Jed, I think, yeah, it goes much much deeper, and he sort of loses his sort of grip. You were saying about the vulnerability of pregnancy. One of the other aspects, I think, is that people often telling you you're not really feeling what you're feeling. It's your pregnancy, it's the hormones. And so anytime she's sort of feeling like, I don't like this doesn't feel good, well, you're just paranoid, it's the hormones. Or if she wants to leave or go somewhere, oh, you can't, why would you jeopardize the baby, so sort of can make you feel crazy. And I think that both Jed and JC are sort of in these states where they're made to feel like they don't know themselves, and I think that can be quite dangerous.
I loved this book. I really, really did. And I love this setting of I feel like there's a lot of horror or a suspense set in that area. Do you want to chat a little bit about it?
Yeah, I'm from Michigan. I'm from the Detroit area, which is sort of the other end of the state of the Upper Peninsula where the book is set. But the Upper Peninsula, it's very remote, very beautiful, but really like a separate country almost when you go there. It really, people speak really differently, in part sort of immigration patterns. A lot of people there came from Cornwall, England, to mine as miners, and they have a patois that's very distinct, and they have a sort of healthy distrust. As a lot of it's a tourist location during the summer and also during part of the winter for skiing. They have a healthy distrust of people that come there just to visit. As I mean, you probably know that a bit from where you are. The people that come for their vacation homes are really kind of different. So there's that tension too, which makes it perfect for something suspenseful, right? Because JC is really a stranger in a strange land there, and she doesn't know who to trust. And so, in this isolated environment where, everyone knows all, what the foods are, what the lingo is, everyone but her, it sort of adds to her sense of isolation, which of course is perfect for a book like this.
I loved it again. I mean, I can't say enough about it. It's really just a delicious, delicious. I hesitate again to call it horror because it's not, and like as a fan of horror, I can say that horror is not all slasher stuff. Although I
Right.
do like
No.
some of that. But this is really like horror in the cerebral sense, which I think, also like is suspense thriller.
Yeah.
And I think there's just a lot. There is a lot to talk about, a lot to sink your teeth into. And I really was just like turning the pages as it got wilder and wilder, and felt, really compelled to continue on this journey. So thank you so much for writing it.
Oh, thank you. And I'm so happy to hear as a horror reader that you found so because I always like to sort of have my foot in all these genres because I love them all. So that makes me happy to hear.
I'm so happy. Do you have any books that you would like to recommend as a writer?
Yes, I mean I can recommend another one that comes out in a few weeks that your patrons might love, which is Laura Lippman's new book called Prom Mom, which um is sort of loosely based on some of those tabloid cases we may remember from a few decade or more ago of young women giving birth, speaking of
Yeah,
at prom,
yeah.
and it spins a thriller from that, and it's real page turner and full of surprises, but also she's just a great writer, so the characters are really rich, and I could not put it down. So I and it of course has a very memorable title, so Prom Mom I recommend.
Oh yeah, for sure. And I was about to say, and those stories made made a lot of Lifetime movies.
They did indeed, and they're often very much about making the young women seem stupid or criminal or cruel. And really, when you would sort of go dig deeper, the story is always much more complicated than those tabloid stories allow. And this novel really shows that.
Thank you so, so much, Megan Abbott. Thank you for Beware the Woman. When does it officially come out?
It's out.
It's out. It's
Yes,
out. So go to the shelves now and get it. Yeah,
absolutely.
please go to the shelves and get it. Be you at your bookstore or Syosset Public Library. Now you need to read this book. It is a really good summer read.
Thank
Thank you.
you.
Thank you. And we are going to close this chapter of Turn the Page.
It's time to close this chapter of Turn the Page. Join us for the next episode.